Hello, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Alex Hart here, and from iHeart Sports. It's that time of week again where we do everyone's favorite thing, the power rankings. Of course, there's going to be a lot of controversy. Some teams had some pretty good weeks, and I moved them up quite a bit. Vice versa, some teams had a pretty awful weeks, and they dropped. Try to kind of see bottom row or teams that have no chance at playoffs, bottom two rows. They're in the hunt, potentially starting to drop out of the playoff hunt. Top row, World Series contenders as of right now, and then next two rows are all competing for that wild card playoff spot. It's kind of how it works. Not necessarily has anything to do with people's standings, et cetera, et cetera. It's based on who they're playing, how I see they're playing, and how they would face up against teams above them or below them. With that being said, let's kick things off, but please go down there, like, subscribe to the channel. We do a power rankings video every week. I do a wake up with baseball video every day, and it's just a review of the games of that day, etc. But yeah, let's kick things off. And we got a new number 30. And I said it in the comments of last week's video that I don't think they could get any worse than what they were doing. And then they go 0-6 this week. Baltimore Orioles 0-6 this week. Now, they have a lot of offense, but the pitching's been pretty atrocious for them. And when you're not winning, you can't go up. So realistically, the other teams in the bottom at least were winning some games along the way. That brings us next to the Pirates. I almost had them in the bottom, but at least they had a win. The big part of this was they did lose a game 20-1. Then they lost again today by a big score. So the Pirates were very close to being in the bottom. Just couldn't. They did at least have one win for them this week against Atlanta. So I give them a little bit of credit. And they looked a little better earlier in the season than the Orioles. That's the biggest thing. Brings us to number 28. Arizona Diamondbacks. So as you can see, the bottom three here are all different from last week. Arizona went 0-4 against Colorado. 0-3 against Colorado and 0-4 against the Dodgers for an 0-7 week. Any three of these teams, pretty much all can be up in the air at this point for that. Next up, we got the Colorado Rockies. And they took care of business this past weekend, at least. They were pretty concrete in last place last week, but they took care of business against Diamondbacks, and they had a couple other wins along the way. Got swept by the Padres early in the week, but they at least showing some signs. They have a couple pitchers that had a good week. They had some offense, moving them up a bit. Number 26, slowly creeping up. Got the Detroit Tigers. Miggy Cabrera came back this week with a couple home runs and hits on for that. They went 3-0. They swept the Seattle Mariners. And then this past weekend, they went 1-2 against KC. So overall, they had a winning week. Having them jump up a little bit in the power rankings, that's for sure. Number 25, the Los Angeles Angels. They had 3 series this week. So they had a doubleheader on one of the days against Minnesota, which they chopped. And then they lost their 2 other series against Oakland and against Cleveland. Losing week all around. They don't have Trout. They just seem to be trending down. Their pitching's been pretty atrocious. As much as I want them to be in the playoff hunt, it doesn't look like that's the case. Tawny's been MVP caliber, but it's hard to see them any higher than that. Brings us to number 24. We got the Cincinnati Reds. And they kicked things off by getting swept by the Giants early in the week, 0-4. They had a little bit of a bounce back this weekend against Milwaukee, 1-2, but again, they won 1 game this week, so it's hard to move them up. They actually dropped a couple spots, I believe, and the Reds are pretty much finding themselves out of the central hunt in the playoffs. Number 23, got the Rangers. The Rangers had a pretty good week overall. They went 1-3 against the Yankees, but then they came in and swept the Astros over this past weekend. So they played 2 really tough teams, had a 500 week, and I say this every morning on Wake Up with Baseball. They just seem to be putting up a fight every time they play. Kyle Gibson's having a great year too, so I want to give him a shout out on that. Brings us to number 22. Seattle Mariners. I gave them so much credit last week. I think I had them I don't even remember. I had them way higher. But then they got killed this week. They went 0-6 against San Diego and Detroit. Another team, it's interesting. We've had a few teams that went 0 this week. I think that's the 3rd team already. It's the Mariners. They built up some credit though, so they're a little bit higher than the other ones because they had built up the credit prior, but pretty much it. Number 21, we got the Twins. They were like the Angels. They had that little doubleheader in the middle of the week with 3 series for themselves, and they came out okay. They went 1-2 against Oakland, and then they won the series over the weekend here against Cleveland, which they're making up some ground, but I think their hole is way too deep, too big and too deep already for them to turn around. They have some injuries, and their pitching's not been great, but they at least won, so they're hovering where they are. They stopped the free fall that they were on because they were up here at the beginning of the season, and they've been falling ever since that. Kansas City actually had a pretty decent week. They went 2-0 against Milwaukee, and then they beat the Tigers. So they're creeping up a bit. They're actually closing in a little bit on 500, and based on how the other teams did in their division over the weekend, they've gained some ground. So they're potentially still in the hunt. This is starting to be the area of where teams early in the season are still in the hunt. Number 19 brings us to the Washington Nationals, and this is the last place team in the National League East, and sure enough, we'll be through all 5 of them rather quickly. The Nationals swept the Baltimore Orioles over the weekend, but that was pretty much it. The Nationals had a rough series against Cubs earlier in the week. The rest of the division's fairly weak, so they're still higher. They have a chance to even win this division, and we'll talk about that as we go along here. Brings us to Miami Marlins, number 18. It's the highest they've been. They've been as low as 30, and I'm starting to come around and realizing that their pitching is giving them an opportunity to win this division. They're the only team in the division with positive run differential before the weekend, because Atlanta, they put up 30 plus runs in their run differential and are now positive, but before that, the Marlins were that only team, and they beat the Mets this past weekend, and we got to be pretty excited. The Marlins have a shot this year. 17 brings us to the Mets, who just lost to the Marlins. I have them ahead because overall I think they are the better team. They are suffering a lot of injuries. They're getting DeGrom back expectedly this week, so expecting them to stay ahead of the Marlins, but the Marlins are right on their heels. And if things don't start shaping up for them, or number 16, I got the Phillies. Like, all 3 of these teams, they're all the same right now. Their records are very similar. They all have something very good about their team, but then they also have something holding them back. If it wasn't for Wheeler, for Philly, I think they'd be in a lot of trouble. He saves them so many times, time and time again in clutch. Prime example against Boston this weekend. They were down 2 games in the series. Wheeler comes out. They at least steal 1 game in the series. So, yeah, Philly, this whole division's upside down. Number 15, we got the Brewers, who had a fairly rough week. 0-2 against Kansas City, and then they did beat the Reds. So 2-1, they'd be a team lower than them, division rival. But the rest of their division's continuing to plow along. Well, they've kind of been below 500 the past couple of weeks. So right in the middle, I'm kind of on the fence of what way they're going to go, and that's really what middling teams are all about. Trending up, we got Chicago Cubs, number 14, and they were one of the bigger jumpers this week. They had a very good week when they went 3-1 against the Nationals. They just finished the Sunday night game against the Cardinals, where they won in extra innings and win that series. So they're really nipping at the Cardinals' heels. Based on the way the season started, I still have my concerns with the Cubs, and the Cardinals have been more consistent. They don't win crazy win streaks and lose streaks. It's been a little bit more consistent. So we're going to see how these next couple of weeks go between the 2 teams and see if that gap gets any tighter or if the Cardinals start pulling away again. Number 13, the Toronto Blue Jays, and honestly, probably I'm being pretty beneficial to them. They're on a 5-game losing streak. They went 1-2 against Boston, and then they're down 0-3 against Tampa over the weekend. They blew a lot of games this week. They had a lot of leads in those 5 losing streaks that they just couldn't close. 2 of them over this past weekend to the Rays. They lost in extras or in the 9th inning. So you have some concerns with the young team, but the talent's definitely there for the compete, and the division is super stacked. So that's another thing holding them back for sure. Number 12, you got the National League East leaders, the Atlanta Braves. I just like how they bounced back this weekend. They lost the first game to the Pirates, but then they came out firing for the next three, won 3 in a row. The rest of the division's a little bit in turmoil. They have Acuna, they have Freeman. Their pitching's only going to get better as the season goes along and these people start getting healthier. And they can't really be much worse than they've been showing, and they're still very much in the hunt for division lead and all that. I think at this point, if I had to bet all my money, I'd pick the Braves to take this division. Number 11, we got the Cleveland Indians. Cleveland went 2-1 against the Angels early in the week, and then 1-2. It's a little 3-3 average kind of week. They kind of went under the radar for me this week. Nothing too popping out. Just again another 500 week. So they didn't go up. They were already up here. So 500 weeks are going to slowly move you out of the playoff picture because you don't usually make the playoffs as a 500 team. Number 10, we bring the Cardinals, who had a little bit of a drop, and it had to do with this Cubs series. The Cubs were a little bit lower last week, and then they win, and I still have them ahead, right? They do beat the Pirates earlier in the week, the 2-0. But yeah, I think the Cardinals, it's in jeopardy now, like this division. It's not secure. They have a couple guys still chasing them down, and for this division, it feels like, especially considering the West, and we'll talk about that soon, that you have to win the division. So between 3 teams, only 1 spot, you got to keep them a little close, but at the same time, that doesn't allow them to be World Series contenders, in my point of view. Number 9, we got the streaking Tampa Bay Rays, won their 10th in a row today, and not much else I can say. They're moving their way up. They were down around here, so you can only go up so far. I know you're winning 10 in a row, but you had Baltimore for half of those games in there. Toronto, those games have been super close, and honestly, they could have lost 2 of them. But their team's holding it together, and they're on their way up. This division, though, they have a couple teams ahead of them still that we haven't talked about. It's a very stacked division. Brings us to number 8, San Francisco Giants. So I had the Giants sweep the Reds early in the week, and then they get swept on the weekend by the Dodgers. So to me, this is concerning, and it lowers their ranking overall, because they lose to the team that they need to beat. They need to win this division. There's only one wild card spot really for grabs, because you expect the Dodgers and the Padres both to make the playoffs. One of them is going to take the wild card spot. So you either got to win this division and they both get the wild card spot, or you got to sneak one at yourself. And losing 3 to the Dodgers really hurts their chances. They did take care of business against the Reds, though. So I at least give them that. They're still 8. 8's a very good score for them. Brings us to number 7. We got the Houston Astros, who took care of business against the A's, 2-1 series, but then they got swept this past weekend, so I have a little bit of concern with that. They got swept by the Rangers, who play tough all the time, but the Astros, like, the depth of the starting pitcher has me a little concerned. They give up a lot of runs against the Rangers, and the games against the A's required some comebacks, so not holding too much again. They're a little bit free-falling to me. Been holding them in high regard for most of the season, but it's time to start giving credit to a lot of these other teams that are now ahead of them. Number 6, they're just scorching right now. I got the New York Yankees. I expect them to at least stay here, or if not get higher. The Yankees have just taken care of business. They just had an amazing series this past weekend where they swept the White Sox, which is kind of interesting because I'm going to, just on the spot here, I'm going to move them up to 5. Because they swept this team, so they got to be ahead, right? They got to be ahead. But what was I saying? New York Yankees, yeah. So they 3-1 Texas, 6-1 week. They were like down here, I think. So they're definitely one of the higher teams. But you gotta do it. Like, their starting pitching's starting to come along, their bullpen's coming along. And for the White Sox, they were number 1 2 weeks in a row. But this was just a rough week for them. They kind of got exposed. They beat Minnesota 2-1 and had a big offensive performance. But you see them play against a top-tier team like the Yankees, and they kind of got handled. And Garrett Cole shut them down. And if you see them against starting pitching that is of high quality, they've been struggling. So I'm starting to realize that maybe they're not the top 5 material that I had them originally. Brings us to number 4. Finally getting a little bit more respect. I know it's been a long time coming. They're slowly moving up the standings. But they've been just playing somewhat 500 ball. They won both series this week, 2-1. Took coming back early against the Jays to get it, but they're winning, and their offense has been solid, and their bullpen in those tight games is getting the job done. So I gotta keep giving them credit. These two are gonna be competing for this spot, and we have the Tampa Bay Rays height on their heels. So like it could be a definite jungle up this week. We'll see how that goes. That brings us to number 3. Giving them a lot of credit right now. Oakland A's. Even though they lost to the Astros and they beat the Angels this weekend, they beat Boston last week. They've been steadily. They win their series. They did lose the Astros. I understand that, but overall they've been deep across the board. The bats have been everyone contributing. All their pitching has been contributing. It's not just one horse. The whole rotation, the bullpen. They've had late inning comebacks. All the sorts of stuff. The A's have just been somewhat of a powerhouse. You can never really sleep on them, so that leaves that. And that brings us to the LA Dodgers at number 2. 7-0 week. What else can I say? They went 7-0 this week. They swept the Giants. They swept the Diamondbacks, both division games. Bouncing back from their downslides that they had. So I don't have them number 1 because Slam Diego Padres are back. Tatis Jr. hit his grand slam this week. The San Diego Padres went 6-0 against teams that they should beat on an average basis, but they still go 6-0. Seattle, Colorado, and they get it done. Offense is popping, their pitching's popping, and they've just been steadily number 2. But it's about time that I give this team some credit. So there you go, San Diego. But yeah, that's the power rankings, guys. If you have anything you'd like to add, where have I overranked? Where have I underranked? Where am I just lost my mind and you have no idea how I can believe such nonsense? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to go out there, like, subscribe. We do these videos every week, so hope to see you in the comment section. Thanks.